Here's something strange I've been thinking about. Why do folks like to say the house always wins? 'Cause even when you win, you don't exactly walk away with the win. Not all of it. Not clean. When you're up, you feel untouchable, like luck shook your hand and called you cousin. You tell yourself you're playing with the casino's money now, like you've been baptized in neon and bad decisions, which is a bold thing to say for a man already sweating in air conditioning. And even if you do win big and race for the hills, there's always something in the distance, a sound, a pull, like a moth that swore it was done with the flame and still finds itself circling back. No story proves that better than the tale of the Ghost of Binions. Now let me ask you something. Imagine you walk into a casino with everything you've got in a whole world stuffed into a suitcase, and you don't sit down for a few warm-up hands. You don't feel the table out. You don't do that polite little dance people do when they're pretending they're in control. You just walk up to the dice table, and you ask to place a bet so large the room changes temperature. One roll, one decision. Everything you are balanced on a bounce of red dice. What would your chances be? And maybe more important, what kind of person even does that? This story starts in Las Vegas. Not the Vegas you see on postcards with fountains and neon. This is downtown, Glitter Gulch, back when the city still had some rough edges and the casinos felt more like dens than resorts. Binion's Horseshoe was famous for a few things: cheap glamour, hard gamblers, and a simple promise. If you had the money, they'd take the wager. Other casinos liked limits. Most had guardrails. Binion's did not. Benny Binion, the man behind it, took pride in that. He even put $1 million in a giant plastic horseshoe on display, like a trophy, like a warning, like an invitation, all at the same time. You could walk right up and stare at it. $1 million sitting there like it didn't weigh nothing. And that right there, that's how places like Binion's talk to certain kinds of people. Not a sign that says, welcome, but one that silent taunts you to prove it. So on September 24th, 1980, a man walks in wearing cowboy boots, fair-haired, young, quiet, and he's carrying 2 brown suitcases. One of them is empty. The other, it's got $777,000 in cash inside. Now, I don't know what you keep in your suitcase. I keep wrinkled shirts and regret. This man kept near 800 grand. He converts it into chips, walks to the craps table, and he puts every last chip on the don't pass line. That means he's betting against the shooter, betting that the roll will fail. It's like showing up to a wedding and betting on the divorce at the altar. Bold, rude, maybe honest. And the table quiets down because everybody can feel it. This ain't a gambler trying to have a good night, but a man looking to answer a question. The shooter sets a point, a 6, and then, 2 rolls later, the shooter throws a 7, which means the don't pass wins. Just like that, he doubles his money. He turns $777,000 into $1,554,000 on one bet. Binion himself helps stack the winnings into the empty suitcase, and then the man leaves. No victory lap, no story, no interviews. He just walks out like he was picking up dry cleaning. The newspapers don't know his name. The casino doesn't know his name. So Vegas does what Vegas always does. It gives you a nickname. They call him the Phantom Gambler. Now, this is the part where the legend starts growing legs, because Vegas is a city built on stories. Half the time, the story matters more than the money. A man shows up, bets everything, wins, disappears. That's true mythology right there. Stuff even the knuckleheads at Hollywood couldn't script. And it sits in Binion's like a ghost story, the kind the dealers tell each other on slow nights. Nearly 4 years go by, and on March 24th, 1984, the Phantom comes back. Same deal, suitcase. This time it's got $538,000 inside. He converts it to chips, walks to the same kind of table, and puts it all on the don't pass again. You ever see somebody do something so insane twice that your brain starts treating it like a strategy? That's what happened. The dice roll, and he wins again. Not only that, he keeps going a little more, makes a few more bets, pulls in another $117,000. Then he leaves, again. Now at this point, most folks would do what any normal human does when fate hands them a miracle. They disappear into the sunset. They buy a ranch. They get quiet. They stop tempting the universe. And honestly, I wish that's where this tale ended. I'd be narrating a different story then. One where an unknown gambler stuns Vegas, fades into the distance, and becomes a true legend of the felt. But normal wasn't really in the Phantom's vocabulary. Because here's what starts to leak out after the second bet. Ted Binion, one of the Binion sons, manages to get the Phantom talking a little. And the story that comes out, it ain't a cool Vegas guy story. It's a lonely story, a strange one, a heavy one. Ted learns the Phantom's name, William Lee Bergstrom. He's 33, from Austin, Texas, made money flipping apartment buildings, and he tells Ted something that turns the whole legend darker. He borrowed a lot of that first suitcase money, and if he lost, he planned to kill himself. 70 pills, that was the plan. Now, I don't know what you call that. Confidence? Desperation? A man putting a coin on the table with God? All I know is that ain't the mind of someone gambling for fun. That's the mind of someone looking for a verdict. And Bergstrom was a peculiar kind of gambler. Most gamblers want repetition. They want the next spin, the next hand, the next rush. Bergstrom didn't. He'd show up, push everything forward, then vanish, like he couldn't stand to sit with the result too long. He also had odd fixations, numbers, omens. According to reports, he liked the number 7, and he told Binion that the $777,000 amount had meaning to him. He lived like a survivalist, driving around with precious metals and supplies, talking about inflation and collapse like the world was a fragile thing. I've met a few men like that. They don't trust banks. They don't trust politicians. They don't trust the weather. But two things shape their everyday decisions: their gut and the moment. And then comes the third visit, the one that turns this from legend into haunting. On November 16th, 1984, Bergstrom comes back to Binion's again. This time he's built himself a $1 million suitcase. Not all cash. It's $550,000 in cash, $310,000 in cashier's checks, and $140,000 in gold Krugerrands. He converts it into chips and puts $1 million on the don't pass line. $1 million on a single roll. Back then, that was the biggest craps bet anybody had ever seen. Even today, it sounds like a sentence you say once and then you stare at the wall a little. And here's the strangest part. Bergstrom tells them he thinks he's going to lose this time. Not a joke, not false humility, more like a man describing weather. The shooter rolls, and a 7 comes up immediately. Come out roll. That's it. He loses the whole $1 million. Ted Binion later describes Bergstrom as calm, almost eerie, says he signed the checks smooth as glass, then went and ate enchiladas that somebody saved for him. Now listen, if I lose $20, I start acting like the Strip has robbed me dry. This man lost $1 million and went to dinner. That kind of calm ain't toughness. That's emptiness. 5 days later, Bergstrom tries to kill himself in Austin. Pills and a plan involving shotguns. The attempt fails. The family learns what's been going on, and the story gets more human and more painful. There's heartbreak involved. A breakup. A relationship that meant more to him than he could admit. He writes that losing the $1 million was tied to it, like he needed the gamble to say what he couldn't say out loud. And that's where the ghost part really begins. Because the Ghost of Binions ain't some sheet floating down a hallway. It's a feeling. It's what happens when money stops being money and turns into proof. Proof you matter. Proof you're worth loving. Proof you're still in control. After the failed attempt, Bergstrom's father calls ahead to Binion's, basically warning them not to take any more of his action. Bergstrom shows up again anyway, suitcases empty. He tries to pass a $1.3 million cashier's check that turns out to be a forgery. And for the first time, the phantom gambler looks less like a legend and more like a man running out of road. On February 4th, 1985, a maid enters a room at the Marina Hotel in Las Vegas, and she finds William Lee Bergstrom dead from an overdose of pills. That's the end of the man. But the story? That's when Vegas really starts telling it. Because here's the part that'll mess with you if you sit with it. For years after, casinos referenced him in promotions. They liked the suitcase. They liked the swagger. They didn't like the ending. Nobody does. So the legend gets cleaned up. The phantom becomes cool, becomes mysterious, becomes a character you can sell. But the real story never stays cleaned up for long. People around the horseshoe remembered the truth. He wasn't there to get rich. He was there to ask the universe a question so loud it echoed through the casino. And when the answer came back wrong, he couldn't live with the silence afterward. So when I say the Ghost of Binions, I don't mean he haunts the building with footsteps. I mean the story haunts gamblers, because it's a mirror. It whispers the same lie the casino whispers, just dressed up nicer. One roll can change everything. And maybe it can, but it can also take everything. And here's the part that really sticks with me. Bergstrom didn't want to be remembered for winning $777 or $538,000. He wanted to be remembered for the $1 million bet, for the risk, for the plunge, like the gamble itself mattered more than the outcome. That's the most honest thing a gambler can admit. So what do we do with this tale? If you're a casino, you turn it into a myth. If you're a gambler, you turn it into a warning. If you're me, you turn it into a story you tell slow, with the lights low, so folks can feel it in their chest. Because the house doesn't always win in one big dramatic moment. Most times, it wins the way a river wins, quietly, patiently, with time. And even when somebody beats it, even when somebody walks out with a suitcase full of money, there's that sound in the distance, that pull, that stage light glow, like a moth that swears it's done and still circles back. That's the Ghost of Binions.